Howdy, y'all. It's Losman here, and taking a bit of a break, so I'm back. So I didn't post a video in the past couple of weeks, and same goes with my edited videos, which I'm going to be putting out one pretty soon, hopefully. So hopefully by the end of this week. But decided to take some time off and enjoy some relaxation time because it's almost summer. Well, it is summer actually, and just wanted to enjoy some movies and not have to worry about, doing videos and other things like that. But that's okay because I'm back. I'm going to do the roundup here and let you know what's up. It's Sunday, and more importantly, it is the end of June, which means that we have the 6 month mark of the year. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to talk about some of the movies I've seen recently. Now, I've been focusing on a number of Giallo movies that I've been catching on various streaming networks. Some of the movies I've been watching include movies directed by Dario Argento, Mario Bava, Lucio Fulci, and a few other directors. I mean, giallos are an interesting format. I know I've discussed them before, but they're very formulaic. Without a doubt, they are. I mean, they usually involve they're basically crime stories. And last week I posted a fun little blog post, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, of the four ingredients needed to create a giallo. It's basically black gloves, a interesting setting, some beautiful locales and whatnot, extremely beautiful women. I mean, we're talking about some of the hottest women out there, and this is before silicone and plastic surgery. So, Edwidge Finch, she's beautiful, absolutely. And lastly, booze. Strangely enough, the same bottle of booze. It's green bottle with a yellow label called J&B. I believe it's Justini and something or another, but it's a blended Scotch that appears in a lot of movies, and not just giallo movies, but action movies and horror movies and other movies. I mean, if you ever want to have a fun Easter egg hunt game or like a drinking game, literally drinking game, hunt out the times you see a J&B bottle. I believe for most of you horror fans out there, the most common one you're going to catch is at the beginning of the movie The Thing, when we're introduced to MacReady, or when MacReady's in a shack and he's basically playing chess. He pours himself a bottle of scotch, and it's a J&B scotch. So yeah, that's a pretty fun reference there. And apparently there's like 300 movies where this appears. Why it is, don't know. I mean, I looked it up, tried to figure it out. What I gather is it's just a very distinctive looking bottle. I mean, it's very unique. I mean, if you ever look at a bottle of martini, um, it's also pretty cool. So it's a very distinctive bottle. So, and you figure if you put it at a distance, you're gonna see it right there. Okay, so let's talk about some of the movies that for the week. Well, basically, like I said, I've been watching giallos. One of the first giallos, or one of the giallos I watched was Don't Torture a Duckling. This is a movie that was directed by Lucio Fulci, and it's an amazing movie. It's basically a tale of a small town. Children are turning up dead, and you have the local priest who's comforting the family. And of course, like any giallo movies, you're going to have an outsider who basically comes in and tries to figure things out, because dead bodies are turning up. And of course, suspicion always lies on the outsider. You have the rich woman there, the rich heiress woman who's very slutty, and the townspeople don't like her, so she has to be the guilty party, or the handsome stranger who's coming to town that nobody knows anything about. Either way, it's a great movie. It's I would put in the top 10 of all giallo movies. It's a really good movie. I mean, it was quite impressive. Another movie I watched was let's see, let's go through the list of movies here. Oh, I finally got a chance to watch Opera. Now, Opera is a Dario Argento movie that he did in the 80s, and it's a really good movie because it's toward the latter part of his giallo craze, and it was as it was made in the late 80s. It's very stylistic, a lot of blood, a lot of gory deaths, very creative deaths. I mean, there's some really good there's some really creative kills in this movie. So Opera is one of the great movies by Dario Argento. So if you want to get become a aficionado of giallo, you definitely want to catch Argento's movies. Okay, another movie I watched was Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. Sorry, I had to look that up because that's a very complicated title. Which is another thing you'll notice about Giallo movies is that they have very complicated titles, almost like titles of a novel or something, which kind of adds a little bit to the fun of the movie. This particular one was directed by Sergio Martino, and it has Edwidge Fenish. One of these days, I'm gonna learn how to pronounce her name. In this movie, you have a married couple. They're aristocrats, basically living on the glory of his family fortune, which has been dwindled away, and as a result, they're living very, very cautiously because they're running out of money, obviously. And essentially, what happens is that the particular head of the household, he throws lavish parties with some of the local young people, the hippies, and the other beatniks out there, and the bohemian crowd, because he wants to live young, and he basically insults his wife because he barely tolerates her, and all of a sudden, dead bodies start showing up. A lot of them tied to that particular individual, including his lover, his mistress. Well, mistress and lover are the same thing. But yeah, so you have, and then of course you have his niece show up, who played by Edwidge, and she kind of stirs things up a bit. So that one was a pretty good story. It is a obscure title, a little harder to find, but it's definitely worth checking out. Once again, it's Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. Wow, what a title. All right, another movie I watched was called The Other Hell. Now, The Other Hell fits into a fun little description of movies known as nunsploitation. Now, this particular movie was let me look up the specs on this movie. Okay, now this particular movie is a little different from other nunsploitation movies. Okay, it was directed by Bruno Mattei and came out in 1981. Now, this particular movie, like I said, was a little different from other nunsploitation movies. Your typical nunsploitation film of the 70s had a lot of had a lot of sex in it, a lot of nakedness. Usually they involved cloistered nuns, in the middle of nowhere, and there was a lot of kinky sex going on, and priests, doing things they shouldn't be doing, nuns doing things they shouldn't be doing, and oftentimes they were courting the devil in some way. So it's an interesting genre. Yeah, if you ever want to look those up, there's quite a bevy of movies out there. I know there's one I watched recently called The Killer Nun, and of course you got Alucarda, which is a famous Mexican nunsploitation movie. That's wow, you really should check that out if you're a fan of horror. Mexican horror of the '70s is crazy, wild, different. Okay, and another movie I watched was I guess on this one there was one particular night I just kind of flipped through and just grabbed whatever I could. I had you had a movie called Ticks. Now, Ticks is a movie from the mid-'90s, directed by Tony Randall, and it has an interesting cast. Seth Green is in it, and Amy Dolenz, and Peter Scolari, Clint Howard. It's your typical bug movie. You've got like mutated creatures basically attacking summer campers. So it's gross. It's got creepy special effects that are kind of silly, but it's one of those cult movies that's popular with people. Like I said, I was just flipping through channels. I thought, let me check this out. Now the next movie I watched was another Giallo movie. This one was called The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward, and that was directed by Sergio Martino. Now this one came highly recommended. This particular movie stars George Hilton and Edwidge Fenish. She pops up in a lot of these movies, believe me. That's one of the reasons why I'm watching them, because, oh my gosh, she's beautiful. Now, this one, you have a lady who is married to a diplomat, but apparently she's kind of a... see, how do you phrase it? She's not getting enough attention, so she gets enticed by an interesting gentleman who might make for a good lover. Now, this particular movie is a giallo from the early 70s, and it's got an interesting plot. It involves a lady who has a dark secret, and along the way you start to learn more about her, and it's one of those movies where you've got some secrets, and you've got crimes that occur, and people die. But as Giallos go, this one stood out a little more. It's a pretty good movie. It's in my top 10, of course, and it's a great movie to check out. So once again, basically that was the let's see, what was the movie again? The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. Strangely enough, they spell Ward with an H at the end. I think it's because they had problems with a woman who had the same name who didn't like the fact that her name was being associated with a horror film, and I guess you got to watch out for that, which is kind of strange because come on, these are fictional movies. All right, so the next movie I checked out was called The Short Night of Glass Dolls. This one was directed by let's see, Aldo Lado, and this one has to do with a journalist whose girlfriend disappears, and of course he's trying to search for her in Prague. They're basically in a foreign country. This one was a your typical Giallo movie. Is really nothing that stood out about it. It was interesting. You had a good cast and not much more. I mean, it kind of really didn't stand out too much from the other movies that I watched. Let's see, and then of course you have Seven Dead in a Cat's Eye. Now this is an odd movie. It was in English and it appeared to take place in Scotland. Um, I believe it is still a giallo, but it's got a plot that's a little less Italian, a little more English. This one has to do with dead bodies that pop up in a strangely enough, you got a cat that kind of like factors into the story a lot. And I do believe this movie was inspired or based on some tales by Edgar Allan Poe. So, if you get some Giallo, some Edgar Allan Poe, that might make for a good combination. Like I said, this was a movie I found on the streaming service, and it's definitely an interesting little film. I mean, these Giallos are worth checking out. I mean, a lot of times they have generally similar plots, but they're still worth checking out because they're entertaining. They're fun. They have beautiful cast and great scenery. And a lot of times, it's just fun to watch a different style of movie, especially from a time period you're not comfortable with. Okay, so and of course the last movie I watched, I finally got around to watching it, was Captain Marvel. I had not seen it yet, and with Avengers Endgame pretty much about to go out of the theaters soon, I definitely want to catch that too. And I've been covering my ears, making sure that I don't hear all the spoilers and everything. So I don't know, maybe I have heard the spoilers, but I just haven't been paying attention. But of course, Captain Marvel. You have the superhero, and it's a good story. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I think it was one of the best of the Marvel movies. You have a great, it's like a lot of the Marvel movies. They're well made. This one was, this one cast Brie Larson in the role of Carol Danvers. She's a pilot and a pretty badass lady, but you also learn that she's like an alien, part of the Kree, and she comes down to Earth. So that's kind of an odd story. Like, how can she be a person and be an alien? Well, they explain the story. It makes more sense when you watch the movie, and I imagine many of you have watched the movie and you agree it's a great movie. I know there are a lot of fanboys out there that complain that, oh, a girl superhero, and that's like, what? Honestly, just be quiet. If you can't accept a woman, as the main character in an action movie, then what? You just need to grow up. I mean, it's dumb to complain about that sort of thing. I mean, women can do more than just look pretty. I mean, this isn't a giallo. Okay, all right. Finally, last night I went out and I got a chance to check out Annabelle. Now, first off, I'm going to say that there's been a number of movies that have come out that I haven't had a chance to check out yet. I know I need to go check out the Chucky movie, and then Midsommar comes out this week, which I will definitely check out. I mean, that's an A24 movie, and those tend to be really deep, interesting movies. But so I decided to go check out the Annabelle movie that came out after a couple of my friends had recommended, and I'll tell you this: it is a good story. Now, the Conjuring series has some pretty decent films, except for a few. I mean, Curse of La Llorona and so this is the third movie to feature Annabelle in the title. Now, of course, it's not the third appearance. Annabelle pretty much has appeared in almost all of the movies, being one of the main features of the Warrens' an interesting career. This particular story concerns their daughter and her babysitter, and generally what happens when someone kind of doesn't follow the rules, and they unleash the evil that that doll, is in control of. It. I'll tell you this: if you haven't seen Annabelle, you should check it out. It is not a gory movie. It's not a bloody movie. It is not a slasher movie. It's a good old fashioned haunted house adventure. It kind of reminded me of a mishmash of Cabin in the Woods meets the Babysitter's Club. And if you're wondering how in the hell can that be, well, watch it. It's interesting. I mean, I really got a kick out of what the direction this movie took. The cast was great. Now, of course, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga do appear in the movie, but they're not really the main characters. They're just there to introduce the movie more or less, and then they come back at the end. The main focus, though, is the actress who played their daughters, what is her name? McKenna. I can't remember her name, but the actress who she's pretty good. She plays their daughter, and of course you have the other actress who plays the babysitter, who I mean, they essentially have to fight off all the demons and evil things that the Annabelle doll kind of like brings into their brings out. It's a good story. I mean, I definitely enjoyed it, and I do recommend it. I know if you're not a fan of the Annabelle series, this is definitely one that stood out. It's actually a really good story, and they did a really good job with it. They also have a fun Easter egg in there. If you know the real story behind Annabelle, you'll get a kick out of it when you see it. Now, that covers like basically the movies that I've watched recently, and all of those will be included in my Losman 300 challenge. Which, by the way, I finished the 150th movie the other night. So yay, 150 movies I hadn't seen before, and I did it before July. Now, of course, I've got 150 more to watch, which is going to get a lot more interesting because I've already burned through a lot of the movies I've been wanting to watch. So I'm going to have to create some new watch lists and start hunting for new films to check out. Now, what I will be doing next is I'm going to be doing a wrap up of the first 6 months of the year, top 10 movies that have been released in 2019. I should have that list out sometime this week, and I will definitely post a link to it on my blog and my Twitter feed. And I can tell you this, as a sneak preview, some of the movies that are going to appear are movies that I've recommended already. Annabelle may get a slot in that. I'll tell you this, there's a possibility. I will say, though, that Midsommar will not be on that list because it is being released in July. So if that movie is as good as they say it is, it may very well be included in a year-end roundup. So just so you know, basically the cutoff point will be tonight if a movie's been released. So that way, if I decide to include the new Chucky movie, if I decide to include the Annabelle movie or any other films, basically release date of before July of this year. So we'll see how that goes. Like I said, I'm gonna have the list out sometime this week. It's gonna be an informal list. I mean, nothing major. Just basically listing the movies that I think are the 10 best of the year. So that way you can go check it out and catch up on the movies. I know some of them may even be streaming right now. Since if they did get an early release. Now, the other thing I was going to talk about before I close out. For the past couple of years, I've been doing fun little challenges for Halloween. 2 years ago, I did 30 lists, 30 lists for Halloween of different topics, and I posted each one daily, which was a good topic. And it's funny because I always go back to those lists because they're actually really good lists, like 10 best Dracula movies, 10 best movies involving deadly children, or 10 best found footage movies. I'm always going back to those because those are some pretty good lists I put together. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to do something where it's 100 days to Halloween, and each day I'm going to be putting out a different posting. It's going to include either a list or it's going to have something unique per day. So as a sneak preview, I'm gonna list some of the like top 5 Giallo movies, top 5 actresses in Giallo, and I'm gonna include 5 movies or 10 movies, in various topics, adding to the list I already have, and who knows, maybe I might resurrect a few of my previous lists with some updates. I know in the past year or two, I've seen some movies that I could definitely include on some of the other lists, especially like Bad Children and like found footage movies, things like that. So I'll be doing that starting sometime in sometime in late July when we hit the point where we're 100 days to Halloween. So I'm gonna get started on those lists pretty soon, and I'll post them on my Twitter feed and on my blog, so that way you can get it checked out. Now, well, that pretty much covers most everything here. I know I took the time off, but I covered my bases on what I've done recently. I'm still hoping that they come up with some guest lists for Alamo City Comic Con in October, because they haven't released any information whatsoever on who's going. However, I did notice that there's another convention in San Antonio coming in September, and they've already announced some of the guests. And now this is not related to Alamo City Comic Con. This is a completely different con. They have Ron Perlman coming, so that already piqued my interest. So I definitely want to meet Ron Perlman. I know he's come to convention in San Antonio before, but I didn't get a chance to meet him. So I'm really excited about that. I definitely want to go check that out. So I'm gonna go ahead and close it out for the night, and wish y'all a spooky week. And from there, it's the Losman. Take care.